The peace talks began the next morning, in a grand chamber at the heart of the orbital palace station. The room was built to remind visitors of Sithari power. The ceiling rose 100 feet above the floor, held up by pillars carved with images of ancient Sithari victories. The walls were lined with banners, showing the crests of the 600 star systems under Sithari rule. At the far end of the room, a raised platform held the Emperor's seat, a throne of black stone that looked like it had been carved from the heart of a dead star. The Sithari negotiating team sat on one side of a long table made from polished dark wood. They were led by General HFY, the Emperor's war minister, a scarred old soldier with one eye missing and a jaw that looked like it had been broken and put back together more than once. Behind him sat 6 advisors in formal robes, and behind them stood 10 armed guards in full battle armor, each one carrying a plasma lance that could burn through ship hull plating. On the other side of the table sat Nathan Cole, Laura Bennett, and a single diplomatic aide, a quiet young man named Kevin Brandt, who carried a datapad and said almost nothing. Behind them stood Danny Herrera and 2 Marines. No heavy armor, no visible weapons beyond standard sidearms. General HFY opened the talks by listing the Sithari demands. He wanted full human withdrawal from all contested border systems. He wanted reparations paid in raw materials, enough to rebuild the 11 fleets the Sithari had lost. He wanted a formal public apology from the Terran Alliance, broadcast across all human channels, admitting that the war had been a human provocation. And he wanted the Iron Will itself handed over to the Sithari as a symbol of human submission. When HFY finished speaking, he slammed his fist on the table hard enough to crack the wood. The sound echoed through the chamber like a gunshot. The Sithari guards shifted forward half a step, hands tightening on their weapons. Nathan did not move. He sat in his chair with his hands folded on the table in front of him, and looked at HFY the way a teacher might look at a student who had given a wrong answer, but was very confident about it. "Are you finished?" Nathan asked. HFY blinked his one good eye. "You have something to say, human?" "I do." Nathan leaned forward slightly. "With respect, General, those are not terms for peace. Those are terms for surrender, and we did not come here to surrender. We came here because both our peoples are tired of dying. Your demands would humiliate the Terran Alliance and guarantee another war within 5 years. I do not think that serves either of our interests." HFY's scales darkened, a sign of anger in Sithari body language. "You speak boldly for a man sitting in the heart of our empire with a single ship." "I speak clearly," Nathan said. "There is a difference." Laura watched the exchange from beside Nathan. She had served with him for 3 years now, and she had learned to read the way he worked a room. Nathan never shouted. He never threatened. He never pounded tables or raised his voice. He simply sat there, calm and steady, and said things that were so precisely true that they cut through all the theater and posturing like a blade through paper. It drove the Sithari crazy. Their entire negotiating strategy was built around intimidation, physical size, loud voices, shows of force. It was how they had dealt with every other species they had encountered. Make the other side afraid, and they would give you what you wanted. But Nathan Cole was not afraid, and his refusal to be afraid was more unsettling to the Sithari than any human weapon. The first day of talks ended with no agreement. HFY stormed out of the chamber. Nathan stood up, stretched his back, and turned to Laura. "That went well," he said. Laura stared at him. "He threatened to have us thrown out an airlock, sir." "Yes, but he did not actually do it." Progress. That evening, Laura sat in her cabin aboard the Iron Will, and thought about the man she served under. She had been assigned to Nathan's crew after the Battle of the Kessler Drift, when the Terran Alliance realized that Nathan Cole was either the luckiest officer in the fleet or something much more dangerous, and decided to give him a proper ship and a proper crew. She remembered reading the battle report for the first time. Kessler Drift was an asteroid field on the border of human and Sci-Fi space, a mess of spinning rocks, dust clouds, and radiation that made sensors nearly useless. The Sci-Fi had sent a fleet of over 200 ships to sweep the field and destroy the small human patrol group that had been harassing their supply lines. Nathan had 5 frigates, 5 small, outdated, barely armed ships, crewed by people who had been given the assignment because nobody else wanted it. When the Sci-Fi fleet entered the drift, Nathan did not run. He pulled his frigates deep into the densest part of the field, where the big Sci-Fi cruisers could not maneuver easily. He sent out modified civilian mining drones, cheap, disposable machines that he had reprogrammed to mimic the energy signatures of human warships on enemy sensors. Suddenly, the Sci-Fi fleet was chasing ghosts. Their formation broke apart as individual captains went hunting for targets that did not exist. And then Nathan struck. He sent his 5 frigates in a coordinated attack on the Sci-Fi command ships, the big, slow flagships that carried the admirals and the communication arrays. He hit them fast, he hit them hard, and he disappeared back into the asteroids before the escorts could respond. Without their command ships, the Sci-Fi fleet fell into confusion. Ships began crashing into asteroids. Some fired on their own allies by mistake. In 6 hours, Nathan had destroyed or disabled 38 Sci-Fi vessels. He lost 1 frigate, 22 crew members dead. Laura knew that Nathan remembered every single name. Then there was Harlan's world, a human colony of 400,000 people, farmers, miners, families, surrounded by a Sci-Fi blockade fleet that was slowly starving them to death. The Terran Alliance did not have enough ships to break the blockade by force. Nathan was sent with a convoy of hospital ships, unarmored transports meant for carrying the sick and wounded. But Nathan had his engineers install military-grade electronic warfare suites on every single ship. When the convoy approached the blockade, the Sci-Fi sensors went insane. They saw a fleet 3 times the actual size, coming from multiple directions at once. False signals, phantom ships, ghost formations that appeared and disappeared like smoke. The Sci-Fi blockade fleet scattered to defend against an attack that was not real. Nathan flew the real convoy straight through the gap, landed on Harlan's world, and began loading people. He worked for 9 days without sleep, moving 400,000 men, women, and children onto every ship he had, packing them in so tight that people were sleeping in hallways and cargo bays. He got them all out, every single one. Not a shot fired. Laura had asked him once, during a quiet moment on the bridge, how he always seemed to know what the enemy would do. Nathan had looked at her with those tired gray eyes and said something she never forgot. "I do not try to predict what they will do, Laura. I try to understand what they are afraid of. Everyone fights differently when they are afraid." It was that understanding that made him dangerous. Not his tactics, not his cleverness. It was the fact that Nathan Cole understood fear, understood it deeply, personally, intimately, and used it the way a surgeon uses a knife. On the second day of talks, Princess Visha requested a private meeting with Nathan. The request was framed as a cultural exchange, a chance for both sides to better understand each other's customs and values. Nathan accepted without hesitation. They met in a small chamber, overlooking the planet. Visha had arranged for a meal, Sci-Fi dishes of spiced meat and fermented fruits, things that smelled strange and looked stranger. Nathan had brought a thermos of black coffee from the Iron Will. Visha was direct. She asked him about Kessler Drift, about Harlan's world, about the decisions he had made, and how he had made them. She was probing him, looking for patterns, weaknesses, something she could use. Nathan answered every question honestly. He told her about the fear he had felt at Kessler Drift, the cold, sick fear of knowing that 200 ships were hunting his people, and that any mistake would kill them all. He told her about the 9 sleepless days on Harlan's world, carrying children onto ships, while the blockade fleet circled overhead like vultures. Visha listened carefully. She expected to find arrogance. She expected to find a man who enjoyed war. Instead, she found something that confused her. Nathan spoke about his victories the way most people speak about funerals, with quiet respect and a deep desire to never go through it again. "You do not enjoy winning," Visha said. "No," Nathan said. "I enjoy my people being alive. Winning is just how I keep them that way." Visha left the meeting and went straight to her father's chamber. Drathis Vel was reviewing fleet reports and did not look up when she entered. "How was your cultural exchange?" he asked. "He is worse than I thought," Visha said. "Worse how? He does not want this war. He does not want any war. But he has already decided what he will do if these talks fail. I could see it in his eyes, father. He has a plan. He has probably had a plan since before he left human space. And whatever that plan is, he has already accepted the cost of it." Drathis Vel looked up from his reports. "A man who fights because he wants to can be stopped. You take away what he wants. A man who fights because he has no choice, that man cannot be stopped. He can only be killed. And I am not confident we can do even that." The Emperor was quiet for a long time. "Continue watching him," he said at last. Visha bowed and left, but as she walked through the golden corridors of the palace station, she could not shake the image of Nathan Cole's eyes, tired, sad, steady, looking at her over a cup of black coffee, carrying the weight of every life he had ever saved and every life he had ever lost. She had studied 100 enemy commanders in her career. She had found weaknesses in all of them. She could not find one in Nathan Cole, and that was what frightened her most of all. By the 4th day of peace talks, something strange was happening. The Sithari were beginning to listen. General Hythrek still growled and slammed his fists on the table from time to time, but the heat had gone out of it. Nathan had proposed a new set of terms, a demilitarized corridor between human and Sithari space, shared trade routes through 3 neutral systems, and a full exchange of prisoners from both sides. No reparations, no public apologies, no surrender of ships. Just 2 tired civilizations agreeing to stop killing each other and start building something better. Several of the Sithari council members had begun nodding quietly when Nathan spoke. Even Hythrek, for all his bluster, had stopped making new demands and started asking careful questions about the details: how wide the corridor would be, which systems would serve as trade hubs, what the rules of engagement would be if a ship from either side crossed the border by accident. Nathan answered every question patiently, clearly, and without a trace of arrogance. He treated the Sithari negotiators as equals, which was something they were not used to from anyone outside their own species. "You are giving too much," Laura told Nathan quietly during a break in the session. They stood in a side corridor, Laura holding a cup of water, and Nathan holding his ever-present coffee thermos. "The Alliance would accept harder terms. We could push for more territory, more concessions. We won most of the battles." "We survived most of the battles," Nathan corrected her. "That is not the same thing. And I am not here to win a negotiation, Laura. I am here to make sure we do not have to fight another war in 10 years. If that means giving up a few systems we barely use anyway, that is a price I will pay." Laura looked at him. "You really think this is going to work?" Nathan was quiet for a moment. "I think it can work. Whether it will depends on whether everyone in that room actually wants peace, or if some of them are just waiting for the right moment to start fighting again." He said it casually, but Laura noticed the way his eyes moved down the corridor, counting guards, noting positions. Nathan was always watching. He was right to watch. Prince Korath Vel was furious. He stood in his private chambers aboard the orbital station and stared at the tactical display built into his wall. The display showed the positions of every Sithari fleet in the sector. Dozens of warships spread across the system on patrol routes, with the main defense fleet stationed near the outer moon of Valeth Prime. Korath belonged to a faction within the Sithari court, known as the Iron Circle, a group of military leaders and nobles who believed that the Sithari Dominion had been chosen by the universe itself to rule over lesser species. They had supported the war against the humans from the very beginning, not because of any border dispute or strategic interest, but because they believed it was the natural right of the Sithari to conquer and dominate. The fact that the humans had fought back and won was an insult that Korath could not swallow. And now his father was sitting at a table with a human, talking about peace, talking about trade routes and shared borders and prisoner exchanges, as if the humans were equals, as if they had earned the right to exist alongside the Sithari instead of beneath them. Korath opened a secure communication channel. The encryption was military grade, routed through 3 separate relay points to avoid detection by station security. On the other end of the channel was Admiral Jiren. Jiren had once been one of the Sithari Dominion's most respected fleet commanders. He had led the invasion of 2 neighboring star systems and crushed their defenses in weeks. But during the war with the humans, Jiren had suffered 3 consecutive defeats, 2 at the hands of Nathan Cole, and had been stripped of his rank and sent to oversee a supply depot in the Outer Territories. He had not gone quietly. Over the past 6 months, Jiren had been gathering ships, loyalists, disgraced officers, captains who blamed the Emperor for the humiliation of the war. He had assembled a fleet of 47 warships hidden inside a dense nebula on the Sithari border, waiting for the right moment to strike. Korath was going to give him that moment. "The talks are progressing," Korath said, his voice tight with anger. "My father is going to sign this treaty. He is going to bow to the humans." Jiren's face appeared on the screen, lean, cold, with a long scar running from his forehead to his chin. "Then we must act before the treaty is signed. Yes, I am sending you the security codes for the orbital palace station and the current positions of the Loyalist Defense Fleet. The fleet is spread across the system on routine patrols. It will take them at least 2 hours to regroup and return to Valeth Prime. And the human ship?" "1 ship," Korath said with a sneer. "1 damaged cruiser with a skeleton crew." "You have 47 warships, Admiral. Destroy the human delegation. Disable the station's defenses, and I will handle the rest. When the smoke clears, I will tell the Council that a rogue human vessel attacked us during the talks. The treaty will die, and the war will begin again, this time under proper leadership." "What about your father?" Korath paused. It was a brief pause, barely a second, but it was there. "My father has grown old and weak. He will be removed from power for his failure to protect the Dominion. I will take his place." Jiren smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. "When?" "Tomorrow. Strike during the morning session, when both delegations are in the main chamber. Maximum impact." The channel closed. Korath stood in the darkness of his room and breathed slowly. He told himself this was necessary. He told himself he was saving his people. Deep down, in a place he would never look at too closely, he knew he was simply too proud to live in a galaxy where a human had beaten him. Meanwhile, Nathan Cole was not sleeping. He stood on the bridge of the Iron Will at 3 a.m, station time, staring at a tactical display. Something was wrong. He could not point to one specific thing, but his instincts, the same instincts that had kept him alive through Kessler Drift and Harlan's World and a dozen smaller engagements, were screaming at him that something was not right. He had noticed small things over the past 2 days. The guard rotation outside the human delegation's quarters had changed twice without explanation. A communications array on the far side of the station had been redirected, a minor adjustment that would have been invisible to anyone who was not specifically looking for it. And one of Danny Herrera's Marines had reported seeing a Sci-Fi officer she did not recognize, accessing a restricted section of the station late at night. None of these things were proof of anything. Any one of them could be explained away. But taken together, they formed a pattern that Nathan had seen before. The quiet rearrangement of pieces on a board before someone made their move. "Danny," Nathan said into his communicator, "wake up. I need your team to do something for me." Danny Herrera's voice came back, groggy but alert within seconds. "What do you need, sir?" "The station's defense satellites. I noticed during our approach that about a third of them are powered down. Maintenance mode. I want your team to go out there and see if they can be reactivated and linked to our tactical system." "Sir, that is, the Scythari will not be happy if they find out we are messing with their defense grid." "Then do it quietly. Take Kevin with you. He is good with systems." "Yes, sir. Can I ask why?" Nathan looked at the tactical display for a long moment. "Because I would rather have a weapon I do not need than need a weapon I do not have." Danny did not argue. He had learned a long time ago that when Nathan Cole told you to prepare for something, you did not ask too many questions. You just prepared. The next morning, Nathan requested a private meeting with Princess Vaisha. They met in the same small chamber as before. This time, there was no food on the table. Nathan sat across from Vaisha with his hands folded and looked at her with an expression she had not seen before. Not calm, not tired, but focused in a way that reminded her of a predator that had caught a scent. "Something is wrong on this station," Nathan said. Vaisha kept her face neutral. "What do you mean?" "Guard rotations have changed without logged orders. A comm array has been redirected to a frequency that does not match any standard Scythari military channel. And someone accessed the station's defensive grid control room at 2 in the morning last night. Someone with high-level clearance." Vaisha said nothing for a moment. Her mind was racing. She had noticed the guard changes too, but she had assumed they were routine. The communication array, she had not known about that. "You are asking me if someone in my court is working against these talks," she said. "I am asking you if someone in your court is planning something that will get people killed." The words hung in the air between them. Vaisha looked at Nathan's face and saw no accusation there, no anger. Just a steady, quiet urgency. He was not playing games. He was not trying to manipulate her. He was telling her that he smelled fire, and asking her to help him find it before the whole station burned. Vaisha thought about Korath, her brother's rage, his hatred of the humans, his connections to the Iron Circle faction. She thought about Jiren, the disgraced admiral who had disappeared from the outer territories months ago. She thought about a dozen small things she had noticed and dismissed. She could not prove anything. Not yet. But the weight of what she suspected pressed down on her like a stone. "I will look into it," she said carefully. "Look quickly," Nathan said. "I have a feeling we do not have much time." He stood up, thanked her, and left. Vaisha sat alone in the chamber for a long time, staring at the table, feeling the shape of something terrible forming in the shadows around her. That night, she tried to access Korath's private communication logs. They were encrypted with a code she did not recognize. Not standard Scythari military encryption, but something older, something used by the Iron Circle. She sat back in her chair and closed her eyes. She could go to her father. But Drathis Vel would demand proof, and proof would take time. Time she was not sure they had. She opened her eyes and did something she had never done before. She sent a private message to the Iron Will. It contained only 4 words: "Keep your ship ready." On the bridge of the Iron Will, Nathan read the message, then looked up at Laura, who was standing beside him. "Wake everyone up," he said quietly. "All hands to battle stations. Do it silently. I do not want anyone on that station to know we are awake." Laura did not ask why. She had seen that look on Nathan's face before, at Kessler Drift, just before the Scythari fleet appeared. Within 20 minutes, every crew member on the Iron Will was at their post. Weapons were powered, and shields were on standby. They did not have to wait long. At dawn, the sensors screamed. The alarms hit every deck of the orbital palace station at once. A deep booming sound that shook the walls and rattled the golden banners hanging from the ceiling. Red emergency lights flooded the corridors. SciFi soldiers scrambled for their posts, grabbing weapons and shouting orders that overlapped into chaos. Admiral Jiren's fleet had arrived. 47 warships dropped out of hyperspace in a tight formation just outside the station's defensive perimeter. They came fast and hard, engines burning hot, weapons already charged. The lead ships were heavy cruisers, massive vessels bristling with plasma cannons and torpedo banks, each one capable of leveling a small city from orbit. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Laura Bennett's voice was calm but tight. 47 contacts, warship class, weapons hot. They are heading straight for the station. Nathan stood at the center of the bridge, hands behind his back, eyes locked on the tactical display. The display showed the station at the center. The incoming rebel fleet on one side, and the Iron Will, one single ship, sitting in orbit like a pebble in front of an avalanche. "Where is the Loyalist defense fleet?" Nathan asked. "Scattered across the system on patrol routes. Nearest group is 90 minutes out. The main body is over 2 hours away. Then it is just us." Danny Herrera's voice came through the comm from the station. He and his team were still aboard, having spent the night reactivating the defense satellites. "Commander, I have got about a third of the station's satellites back online and linked to our tactical grid. They are old and the targeting software is a mess, but they will shoot." "Good work, Danny. Get your team back to the ship. Use the emergency docking tubes." "Already moving, sir." Nathan looked at the tactical display one more time, his mind running calculations that most people would need a computer for. 47 ships against 1. Those were not good numbers by any standard. But Nathan did not think in terms of numbers. He thought in terms of geometry, timing, and fear. He pointed at the display. "Laura, look at their approach vector. They are coming from the far side of the planet, which means they have to swing around and approach the station through this corridor between the planet's gravity well and the station's mass. That corridor is narrow, maybe wide enough for 8 ships to fly side by side." "You want to use the choke point," Laura said. "I want to make 47 ships fight like 8. Move us to this position here, right at the mouth of the corridor. Put the station behind us and the planet's gravity well on our left. They cannot flank us without flying into the gravity well, and they cannot go around us without exposing themselves to the defense satellites." Laura's hands moved across her console. The Iron Will's engines fired, and the ship began to move, positioning itself like a door being closed across a hallway. Nathan opened a communication channel. His voice was broadcast on all frequencies, to the rebel fleet, to the station, to anyone listening. "This is Commander Nathan Cole of the Terran warship Iron Will, addressing the unidentified fleet approaching Valith Prime. You are entering a protected zone during active peace negotiations. You have one chance to power down your weapons and stand down. I will not offer a second." The response came quickly. Zirin's scarred face appeared on the screen, his yellow eyes burning with contempt. "One ship," Zirin said. "You are standing between me and my destiny with one ship. Move aside, human, and I will let you live." "I do not believe you will," Nathan said, "and I am not moving." The rebel fleet accelerated. "All hands," Nathan said, his voice carrying across the Iron Will like a steady drumbeat. "We are about to take fire from a superior force. Our job is to hold this position until reinforcements arrive. Every minute we hold is a minute the Loyalist fleet gets closer. I know the numbers do not look good. They never do. But we have held worse lines than this, and we are still here. Do your jobs. Trust each other. We will get through this." The first volley hit the Iron Will like a hammer. The ship shuddered from bow to stern. Sparks flew from overhead panels. A conduit burst on the lower deck, spraying coolant across the floor. "Shields holding at 82%, Laura reported. "They are focusing fire on our forward section." "Return fire. Target the lead ship's engine array. I want him slowed down." The Iron Will's main batteries spoke, bright lances of energy that crossed the distance between ships in a heartbeat, and struck the lead cruiser's engines. The cruiser shuddered and fell out of formation, trailing smoke and debris. "Hit confirmed. Lead ship is losing speed." "Good. Now target the second ship's bridge tower. Take out their command and control." This was how Nathan fought. Not with brute force, not with overwhelming firepower, but with surgical precision, hitting the exact points that would cause the most disruption with the least expenditure of ammunition and energy. He did not try to destroy ships. He tried to blind them, cripple them, cut them off from each other. An enemy fleet that could not communicate, could not maneuver, and could not see was not a fleet anymore. It was just a collection of confused, scared individuals. The defense satellites that Danny's team had reactivated opened fire, catching the rebel ships in a crossfire from above. The satellites were old, and their targeting was not perfect, but they did not need to be perfect. They just needed to add chaos to an already chaotic situation. Jiren's fleet pushed into the choke point anyway, driven by desperation and rage. Ships crowded together in the narrow corridor, getting in each other's way, blocking each other's firing lines. Nathan exploited every mistake. He ordered the Iron Will to focus fire on ships that were trying to turn or maneuver, hitting them at their most vulnerable moments. "Deck 7 reports a hull breach," Laura said, her voice still steady, but louder now over the sound of impacts. "Damage control teams are responding. We have lost 2 forward gun emplacements. Reroute power from the port batteries to reinforce forward shields. We do not need to shoot in all directions. They can only come from one way." The battle raged. The Iron Will took hit after hit. Sections of the hull glowed red from plasma impacts. Interior compartments filled with smoke. Crew members fought fires, sealed breaches, and dragged wounded to the medical bay, all while the ship continued to fight. Danny Herrera, back aboard and moving through the ship like a force of nature, led a team of Marines to repel Sithari boarding pods that had latched onto the hull. The fighting in the corridors was close and brutal. Sithari Marines were bigger, stronger, and armored head to toe. But Danny's people fought with a kind of desperate determination that the Sithari had never encountered before. They did not retreat. They did not break. They held every corridor, every junction, every doorway, fighting with rifles, sidearms, and when those ran out, with fists and improvised weapons. On the orbital station, Princess Vaisha watched the battle unfold on the command center's tactical display. She could see the Iron Will, one ship battered and burning, holding the line against an armada. She could see Nathan's strategy, the choke point, the satellites, the precise targeting of command ships, and she understood it with a clarity that took her breath away. But what struck her most was not the tactics. It was what she saw on the video feed from the Iron Will's bridge. Nathan stood at the center of the chaos, issuing orders in a voice that never rose above conversational level. When a crew member reported casualties on Deck 7, 3 dead, 5 wounded, his voice cracked. Just for a second. A tiny fracture in the steady wall of his composure. Then he closed his eyes, breathed, and kept going. He was not enjoying this. There was no fire in his eyes, no battle joy, no warrior's pride. He fought the way a doctor performs surgery on a dying patient, with grim focus, steady hands, and the desperate hope that if he did everything right, someone would survive. Vaisha made her decision. She turned from the display and walked to the station's communication console. She overrode the security lockouts with her Imperial authorization codes and opened a broadcast on all Sithari military frequencies. "This is Princess Vaisha Vel, daughter of High Sovereign Drathis Vel, speaking on Imperial authority. The fleet attacking this station is not acting on the Emperor's orders. It is a rebel force, led by the disgraced Admiral Jiren, acting in alliance with Prince Korath Vel, who has committed treason against the throne. All loyalist Sithari vessels are ordered to rally at Valeth Prime immediately. This is not a request. This is a direct Imperial command. The broadcast went out across the system. On a dozen ships scattered across Sci-Fi space, captains heard the princess's voice and began changing course. But Vaisha was not done. She gathered the station's internal guard, 40 soldiers loyal to the Emperor, and marched to Korath's chambers. She found him there, standing over a communication console, speaking to Jiren in rapid, panicked Scythari. When the door opened, and Vaisha walked in with armed guards at her back, Korath froze. "Sister," he said, "what are you doing?" "Stopping you. You do not understand. This is for our people. The humans are dying right now to protect our father's station. One ship, Korath. One ship is standing between Jiren's fleet and this station, and it is a human ship. What does that tell you? It tells me they are fools. It tells me they are better than you." The words hit Korath like a physical blow. His scales darkened almost to black. For a moment, Vaisha thought he might attack her. But the guards stepped forward, weapons raised, and the moment passed. "Take him," Vaisha said. "Hold him in the detention level. He is to speak to no one." The guards seized Korath. He snarled and twisted, but he did not fight. Even Korath knew it was over. Vaisha returned to the command center just in time to see the first loyalist ships arriving. 3 cruisers, then 5 more, then a dozen, dropping out of hyperspace in rapid succession, and forming up around the station. Jiren saw them coming. His rebel fleet was already battered. 12 ships crippled by the Iron Will and the defense satellites. Another 6 damaged in the choke point. Now the loyalist fleet was closing in from behind. He ordered his fleet to break off and retreat through the only remaining gap in the formation, the space behind the Iron Will, between the planet's gravity well and the station. But Nathan had already moved the Iron Will to block that exact path. Jiren's escape route ended at the battered hull of a human warship that had been fighting for over an hour and still refused to stop. Trapped between the Loyalist fleet and the Iron Will, outnumbered and outmaneuvered, Jiren's fleet began to surrender. Ship after ship powered down their weapons and dropped their shields. Jiren himself was the last to give in. His flagship sat motionless in space for a long minute, guns still active, as if he was considering one final charge. Then his weapons went dark, and it was over. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Nathan Cole stood in the smoke and the emergency lighting, surrounded by damage reports and casualty lists, and allowed himself to breathe. "How bad?" he asked Laura. 6 dead, 23 wounded. Hull integrity at 41%. We are not going anywhere fast, but we are alive. Nathan closed his eyes. 6 names, 6 people who had trusted him to bring them home and would not be going home. He opened his eyes. "Send a message to the station. Tell them the situation is secure, and tell Princess Vaisha, thank her." Laura nodded and sent the message. Outside the viewport, the stars were quiet again. The days after the battle moved slowly, like a river that had been running too fast and was finally learning to rest. Prince Korath Vel was brought before the Sithari High Council, in chains of black metal. The chamber was silent as the charges were read. Treason against the throne, conspiracy with a disgraced officer, endangering the life of the High Sovereign, and providing enemy forces with classified security codes that could have led to the destruction of the orbital palace station and everyone aboard it. Korath stood tall through the reading. He did not apologize. He did not beg. He stared at his father with burning yellow eyes and said that everything he had done for the honor of the Sithari people. Emperor Drathis Vel looked at his son for a long time. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with something that was not anger. It was closer to grief. You did not do this for our people, Korath. You did this for yourself. Because you could not accept that the universe does not bend to your pride. Korath was stripped of his titles, his rank, and his place in the line of succession. He was sentenced to imprisonment in the deep vaults beneath the surface of Valith Prime, a place where Sithari who had betrayed the throne were kept in silence and darkness, forgotten by history. As the guards led him away, Korath passed Visha. He stopped and looked at her, and for a moment the anger in his face cracked, and she saw something underneath it, something small and lost, like a child who had broken something precious, and only just realized it could not be fixed. You chose them, he said. You chose the humans over your own blood. I chose peace over war, Visha said. I chose life over death. If that means choosing a human over a prince, then yes, I did. Korath said nothing more. Visha watched him go, and felt something break inside her that she knew would never fully heal. Admiral Xiren and his officers were handed over to the Sithari military courts. The trials would take months, but the outcome was already certain. Xiren would spend the rest of his life in a cell, surrounded by the ghosts of the ships and soldiers he had wasted on his ambition. With the rebellion crushed and the traitors removed, the peace talks resumed. But the atmosphere in the negotiating chamber was completely different from before. General Hythrek, who had spent the first days of talks slamming his fists and making threats, now sat quietly and listened. The Sithari council members, who had treated the human delegation with barely concealed contempt, now looked at Nathan Cole with something new in their eyes. Not friendship, it was too early for that. The kind of respect that comes from watching someone bleed for you when they had no obligation to do so. Nathan presented the same terms he had offered before the attack. The demilitarized corridor, the shared trade routes, the prisoner exchange. He did not ask for more. He did not use the battle as leverage to demand better terms. He did not remind the Sithari that a single human ship had saved their emperor's life and their station from destruction. Laura thought he should have. Danny Herrera definitely thought he should have. But Nathan simply sat at the table and talked about the future as if the past 4 days had not happened. When one of the Sithari council members asked him why he was not asking for more, Nathan said, "Because the purpose of these talks was never to gain an advantage. It was to build something that would last. If I use what happened to squeeze you for concessions, I might get a better deal today. But I will also plant the seed for the next war. And I am tired of wars." The treaty was signed 3 days later. They called it the Valith Accord. It was a simple document by galactic standards. 23 pages covering borders, trade, military restrictions, prisoner exchanges, and a framework for future diplomatic relations. It was not perfect. Both sides had to give up things they wanted. But it was real and it was honest, and both sides believed it could work. Emperor Drathis Vel signed it with a ceremonial blade, cutting a small mark on his palm and pressing his blood to the document in the traditional Sithari way. Nathan signed it with a pen, a simple ordinary pen that he had carried in his jacket pocket since his first day in the service. After the signing, there was a ceremony. The Sithari loved ceremonies. This one took place in the Great Hall of the Orbital Station, with hundreds of Sithari nobles, military officers, and diplomats in attendance. The hall was decorated in gold and silver, and the air hummed with the low, resonant chanting of Sithari musicians, playing instruments that sounded like the deep voice of the universe itself. Emperor Drathis Vel stood before the assembly and announced that he was bestowing upon Commander Nathan Cole the crest of Valith, the highest honor the Sci-Fi Dominion could give to someone who was not Sci-Fi. In 6,000 years of Sci-Fi history, the crest had been given to outsiders fewer than 10 times. Nathan accepted the honor with a small nod. The crest was a medallion of black metal, shaped like a Sci-Fi eye, set with a single red stone at the center. Drathis Vel placed it in Nathan's palm, and their eyes met. The towering alien emperor and the quiet, tired human commander. "You saved my life," Drathis Vel said, "and the lives of my people." "Your daughter saved your life," Nathan said. "I just bought her some time." For the first time in the entire week, Drathis Vel smiled. It was a strange sight on his sharp, scaled face, awkward and unfamiliar, like a mountain trying to look friendly, but it was genuine. The ceremony ended. The crowds dispersed. The delegations began packing up and preparing to return to their respective homes. The war was over. The peace had begun. Nathan walked through the station's corridors one last time, heading toward the airlock, where the Iron Will waited. The ship looked even worse than when it had arrived, patched with emergency hull plates, several gun emplacements missing entirely, scorch marks covering every surface. But it was still in one piece. It was still flying. He was halfway to the airlock when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and found Princess Visha standing in the corridor. She had changed out of her formal council robes and wore a simple dark uniform, the kind Sithari intelligence officers wore when they were working, not performing. Without the golden cloak and jeweled armor, she looked younger, sharper, more real. They stood in the corridor for a moment, looking at each other. Two people from different species, different worlds, different sides of a war that had cost both of them things they would never get back. "I was wrong about you," Visha said. "In what way?" "I feared you because I thought you were a weapon, something built to destroy. But you are not a weapon, Commander. You are a shield." Nathan looked at her, and for the first time since arriving at Valith Prime, for the first time in a very long while, he smiled. It was a small smile, tired around the edges, but real. The kind of smile that comes from hearing something true. "The best commanders are the ones who never wanted to be commanders at all," he said. "We just ended up here because someone had to do it, and nobody else raised their hand." Visha tilted her head slightly. "Is that what happened to you?" "More or less. I wanted to be a teacher, if you can believe that. History, mostly. I liked the idea of helping young people understand where they came from, so they could figure out where they were going. Perhaps when this is all behind you, you still can. Perhaps." They stood in silence for another moment. Then Visha extended her hand, a human gesture, one she had clearly practiced. Nathan took it. Her hand was cool and scaled, strong, but not crushing. "Goodbye, Commander Cole. Goodbye, Princess Vel." She released his hand and stepped back. Nathan turned and walked to the airlock. Laura and Danny were waiting for him inside. The airlock door was open, showing the battered interior of the Iron Will, scuffed floors, replacement panels, the smell of welding and recycled air. "Home. Ready, sir?" Laura asked. Nathan paused at the threshold. He looked back through the airlock window at the golden corridors of the orbital station, the alien architecture, the strange light, the world he was leaving behind. Then he turned to Laura. "How is the crew?" "Tired, hurting, but they are ready to go home." "Then let us go home." He stepped through the airlock, the door sealed behind him with a quiet hiss. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Nathan took his seat in the command chair, a worn, creased seat that had molded to his shape over years of use. The view screen showed the orbital station ahead and the vast purple curve of Valith Prime below. Kevin Grant was at the navigation console. Danny leaned against the wall near the door, arms crossed, looking like a man who was planning to sleep for a week straight once they were in hyperspace. "All stations report ready, Commander," Laura said. "Undock. Set course for Terran space. Take us home. The magnetic locks released. The iron will drifted away from the station, turned slowly, and pointed its scarred nose toward the stars. Laura looked over at Nathan. "Sir, are you okay?" Nathan was quiet for a long time. The stars filled the viewport. Infinite, cold, beautiful. "Not yet," he said, "but maybe soon." The iron will's engines fired. The ship leaped forward, stretching toward the light, and then it was gone. A brief streak across the sky of Valith Prime, and then nothing but empty space and silence. Back on the orbital station, Emperor Drathis Vel stood at the observation window of his private chamber, with Vaisha beside him. They watched the human ship depart. A tiny point of light, growing smaller and smaller against the endless dark. "Tell me something," the Emperor said. "Why did you risk everything? Your position, your place in the succession, your brother. Why did you side with them?" Vaisha was quiet for a long time. She watched the last trace of the iron will fade into the stars, and thought about a man sitting in a worn chair on a broken ship, carrying the names of every person he had lost, like stones in his pockets, and still finding the strength to fight, not because he wanted to, but because someone had to. "Because I watched him fight, Father," she said. "Not to conquer, not to humiliate. He fought the way a parent fights for a child, with everything he had, and with no desire to do it again. I have seen 1,000 Sithari generals who love war. I have never seen anyone fight like a man who hates it." She paused. "That is why I feared him, and that is why I trusted him." The Emperor said nothing for a long time. He simply stood at the window, watching the stars, feeling the weight of 6,000 years of Sithari history pressing down on his shoulders. Then, slowly, so slowly that Vaisha almost did not notice, the High Sovereign of the Sithari Dominion, ruler of 600 star systems, emperor of the most powerful civilization in the quadrant, bowed his head. Not to the stars, not to his own reflection in the glass, to the memory of a small, tired, extraordinary human who had flown away into the dark, carrying nothing but a pen in his pocket, and the hope that he would never have to fight again. The stars shone on in silence. The Terran warship Iron Will came out of hyperspace like a ghost, stepping through a wall. It was not a pretty ship. It was not built to impress anyone. The hull was covered in scorch marks and patches of new metal welded over old wounds. Entire sections of armor plating had been replaced so many times that the ship looked like it was stitched together from the bones of a dozen different vessels. But it moved with the quiet confidence of something that had survived everything the galaxy had thrown at it and was still standing. On the bridge of the Iron Will, Commander Nathan Cole stood with his hands behind his back and stared at the planet filling the viewport, Valith Prime, the throne world of the Sithari Dominion, a massive world of deep purple oceans and silver-gray landmasses, ringed by 3 moons and an orbital defense grid that could turn a fleet into dust in under 60 seconds. Nathan was not a tall man. He was not especially broad or muscular. He had brown hair that was starting to go gray at the sides, a face that looked tired even when he had slept well, and eyes the color of cold iron. He did not look like a man who had won 7 major battles against the most powerful alien empire in the known galaxy. He looked like a man who had not taken a vacation in a very long time. "We are being scanned, Commander," said Lieutenant Commander Laura Bennett from the tactical station. She was a sharp woman in her mid-30s, with red hair pulled back in a tight bun, and a habit of stating things in the flattest voice possible. 8 Sithari cruisers have changed course to shadow us. Weapons are powered, but not locked. They are being polite about it then, Nathan said. Their version of polite, yes sir. Nathan nodded. Open a channel to the orbital palace station. Standard diplomatic greeting. Let them know we are here for the peace talks and nothing else. A few seconds later, a deep, rumbling voice filled the bridge in translated Sithari. It told them they were cleared to dock at Bay 14 of the Orbital Palace Station, and that any deviation from the assigned flight path would be treated as an act of war. "Friendly," muttered Sergeant Danny Herrera from behind Nathan. Danny was a thick-necked man with dark skin and hands that looked like they were built for breaking things. He led the small security detail that would accompany Nathan to the station. "Real friendly people. They lost 11 fleets and 4 colonies to us in 18 months, Danny," Nathan said without turning around. "They have a right to be nervous." "We lost people too, sir." "Yes, we did." There was silence on the bridge for a moment. Everyone knew what the war had cost. 14,000 human soldiers dead. 2 colony ships destroyed. The mining settlement on Barker's Reach wiped out completely. 300 civilians, including children. Nathan had been the one to find the wreckage. He never talked about it. But Laura had seen the way his jaw tightened whenever someone mentioned Barker's Reach, like something inside him was being held together by nothing but willpower. The iron will docked at the Orbital Palace Station with a dull clang of magnetic locks. Nathan straightened his uniform, a plain gray jacket with no medals, no ribbons, no decorations of any kind. Laura had once asked him why he never wore his commendations. He had told her that medals were for people who needed to be reminded of what they had done. He did not need reminding. The airlock opened, and Nathan stepped out onto the station, with Laura on his left and Danny on his right, followed by 4 Marines in light armor. The station corridor was enormous, built for Scythari, who stood 8 to 9 feet tall on average. The walls were carved from something that looked like black stone veined with gold, and the air smelled of something sweet and metallic, like hot copper mixed with flowers. A Scythari delegation was waiting for them. There were 12 of them, each one dressed in golden armor that gleamed under the corridor lights. Their skin was dark green and scaled, like the hide of something ancient and cold-blooded. Their eyes were large, yellow, and slitted, and their faces had a sharp, angular structure that made them look like they were always judging everything they saw. Most of them stood over 8 feet tall. The tallest one standing at the center of the group was nearly 9. That was High Sovereign Drathis Vel, Emperor of the Scythari Dominion, ruler of 600 star systems, and commander of the largest military force in the quadrant. He wore a crown of twisted black metal set with red stones that pulsed with a faint inner light. His golden cloak trailed behind him like a river of liquid metal. He looked down at Nathan the way a mountain looks down at a stone. "Commander Cole," Drathis said. His voice was deep enough to vibrate in Nathan's chest. "You are smaller than I expected." Nathan looked up at the Emperor. He did not flinch. He did not step back. He extended his hand. "Your Majesty, thank you for agreeing to these talks. I hope we can find a path forward that does not require any more of our people to die." Drathis stared at the hand for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached down and took it. His hand was enormous, clawed, and cold. Nathan shook it firmly once and let go. Behind the Emperor, standing on a raised balcony overlooking the corridor, Princess Vaisha Vel watched the entire exchange through narrowed eyes. Vaisha was not like the rest of her family, where her father was massive and imposing. Vaisha was lean and sharp, built more like a blade than a wall. Her scales were a lighter shade of green, almost silver in certain light, and her eyes were a deeper gold than the others. She was the Emperor's eldest child, his chief intelligence advisor, and the one person in the Sithari court who had bothered to actually study the humans instead of simply trying to kill them. She had read every battle report from the war. She had studied the tactics, the strategies, the movements of every human fleet. She had read psychological profiles of human commanders, listened to intercepted communications, and analyzed patterns of behavior that most Sithari dismissed as random chaos. And she had read everything there was to read about Nathan Cole. Standing beside her on the balcony was her younger brother, Prince Korath Vel. Korath was big, even by Sithari standards, nearly 10 feet tall, with thick arms and a warrior's build. He wore ceremonial battle armor covered in the symbols of campaigns he had led, most of which had ended in Sithari retreat. "Look at him," Korath said with a low laugh, nodding toward Nathan below. "He is so small. I could break him with one hand. This is the human they sent to negotiate? This is the great commander who defeated our fleets?" Vaisha did not laugh. She watched Nathan as he walked beside her father down the corridor. She watched the way he moved, calm, steady, with no wasted motion. She watched the way his eyes moved, not darting with fear, but scanning, measuring, noting every guard, every exit, every camera. She watched the way his first officer stayed close, but not too close, always positioned to cover his blind side. And she watched the way the human sergeant kept one hand near his sidearm at all times, not out of aggression, but out of a kind of disciplined readiness that spoke of long practice. Korath was still laughing. "I would love to meet him in the fighting ring. 5 seconds, maybe less." Vaisha turned to him. Her voice was quiet, almost a whisper. "Not him, brother. Not him." Korath raised a brow ridge. "What?" But Vaisha was already turning away, her eyes still on the small gray figure walking through the golden halls below. Later that evening, she stood in her father's private chamber and delivered her assessment. Drathis Vel listened in silence, sipping from a goblet of dark wine. "He is dangerous, father," Vaisha said. "More dangerous than anyone we have faced. He is one man with one broken ship. He was one man with one broken ship at the Kessler Drift. He destroyed 38 of our vessels with 5. He was one man at Harlan's World. He evacuated 400,000 people through our blockade without firing a single shot. Do not measure him by his size. Measure him by what he has already done." Drathis Vel set down his goblet. "You sound afraid." Vaisha met her father's eyes without looking away. "Not him, father. I fear that human commander." The Emperor said nothing, but for the first time in a very long while, the certainty in his golden eyes flickered, just for a moment, like a candle touched by wind.